KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. As President Trump begins his second term, one of his promises to supporters has been to carry out the largest deportation in U.S. history. This has a number of Colorado communities on edge, especially in places where immigrants without legal status make up a large part of the population. It also has prompted education leaders across Colorado to prepare for how their students might be affected by arrests made by immigration officials. Our guest today is one of the people offering advice to Colorado educators on this topic. Steve Joel was the superintendent of schools in Grand Island, Nebraska, when immigration officers raided a meatpacking plant there in 2006. The arrests in Grand Island rattled the community, and the experience taught Steve many lessons, which he recently shared with school leaders at a conference of the Colorado Association of School Boards. Steve, who's retired now, spoke with me about his advice for educators in the months ahead.
The single most important priority for us, for as long as it takes, is our children. And that was my message for superintendents, is that you can't control what may or may not occur. What you can control is being prepared and being ready to administer support for the kids that need it the most.
The ICE raids in 2006 resulted in about 250 people arrested in Grand Island, which directly impacted dozens of students in your district. When you spoke in Colorado, you described the day of the raid as the longest 24 hours of your career. What stands out to you most as you remember that day?
Well, it was the longest 24 hours of my career. What stands out the most is we were able to put a plan in place, and we didn't have any idea how we were going to meet the needs of our children and our families. But we also knew that we didn't have time to ponder it very long, because by the time school started, there was going to be a lot of disruption in the lives of children. And we were able to touch each child that we believe might have been impacted. And again, there was so much uncertainty that all we can offer them was comfort, and that we were going to continue to try to make school as safe as possible. And probably in a 2-week period of time, I think we got most of our children back in school.
No, I read the school district had about 10,000 students at the time. How many had families affected by the raids?
Well, we started with a list of over 1,000 students, because what we had to do, again, we didn't have any information. Nobody gave us any idea what was happening. It was first shift at the packing plant. Everybody that registered as a student that we thought had migrant status, we assumed that they were impacted. So we touched an awful lot of kids, actually preschool through grade 12, but so many of them had parents that were on second shift or third shift, which, as you could imagine, parents on second and third shift didn't go to work.
Yeah.
And in fact, they came to get their children very, very rapidly, and to go home and lock their doors and close their curtains. And they didn't trust anybody for quite a while.
And I want to dig a little more into some of the advice that you shared with the school leaders that you spoke with recently. One of your big takeaways was to have a message ready for families about how the district is prepared to support their students. What should this message say to the community?
Well, what the message should say is we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that schools remain safe. Please keep your kids in school. We don't want that kind of disruption, if at all possible. There are supports through our systems, whether it be social supports or emotional supports or financial supports, and you can access them through our school district. And then to the degree that you can, I say stay away from making any political statements, because again, this is really what we care about as educators, is that every single student that shows up in our school, we give them everything that we can and will do. And so that was the message really that we did. Now, behind the scenes, we were raising resources. We were trying to get dollars so that we could help displaced students and families. But, at the end of the day, there was just a lot of disruption. And then the other message I had for them, too, is you may have some students who are going to lose both parents, right? They're both going to get detained. And then the question is, how do you relocate them with a trusting family member? I've encouraged superintendents and school board members around the country is do your due diligence, be prepared, know who might be impacted. And then my final message is know this. In the areas of your district that are most impacted, don't forget your teachers and your support staff. They love these children, and it's going to absolutely destroy them when they see that their student is not in school or is exhibiting the kind of hurt that an incident like this will bring about.
That's really good to keep in mind. I noticed that Denver Public Schools, which is the largest district in Colorado, has already posted, and they're already talking about possible immigration enforcement. They sent out a list of resources for families who might be affected. I'm curious how that compares to the kind of communication that you recommend.
Well, I think it's great. I think what Denver Public's put together could very well be a playbook for those that are not prepared. One advantage that the superintendents and school boards have today that we didn't have is they have a chance to plan for this. I think people that are listening to this should know that Denver Public Schools have been working on this for a couple of months.
Let's talk briefly about what school leaders should do if federal immigration officials show up on school grounds. Earlier this week, we learned the Trump administration has given the green light for immigration arrests at or near schools. That is a change from past policy. How should school leaders handle it?
Well, I think superintendents need to stand up and say, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that our students are represented, that their rights are upheld, and that, we can reunite them with their families as quickly as possible. Having said that, I've read what you're talking about, Erin, and I do know that, in fact, if they want to go into school and use kids as a lever to get to adults, they can, and maybe they will this time. But I will tell you, that's not going to sit well with the American public, because at the end of the day, even people who believe that this is the right thing for the government to do, they don't like what this does to families. So, of course, I would expect administrators to stand tall and ask questions and, basically say, look, we want to make sure that our students' rights are protected.
Within communities and within school districts, there are a lot of different political views on immigration policy. Just to put it very simply, some students come from families who support immigration sweeps. How did you navigate that tension during your experience, and what lessons can school leaders take from that?
Well, we didn't make that an issue inside the schools. We just knew right then that, what it was doing to families was terrible, right? It was a tragedy. It impacted about 5 of our schools pretty significantly. But at the end of the day, we didn't let that debate about pro and con become part of our culture. We just basically said, remember our mission. Err on the side of kids. Put kids at the center of everything that you do. The vast majority of people, even those with strong political views, will support the fact that you care about children.
Steve Joel is a former superintendent for schools in Grand Island, Nebraska. He advised Colorado school leaders on how immigration enforcement might affect their students. You'll find more coverage in our show notes and at KUNC.org. While you're there, check out some recent episodes of In The NoCo. We podcast every interview we publish, so you never have to miss a minute of the show. And be sure to follow the show for free so you never miss an episode. Do that wherever you like to listen to podcasts. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thanks so much for listening.